Aloha and good evening. Welcome to Hawaiian Electric's virtual community meeting. Tonight, we'll be sharing an update on renewable energy projects here on Hawaii Island, including the next stage of our renewable energy procurement. We really appreciate those who have tuned in from our Hawaii Island communities. We also welcome those participating from the neighbor islands. Thank you all for taking the time to join this important conversation and for providing your valuable input on the next stage of renewable energy procurement on Hawaii Island. I'm Jennifer Zelko-Schluter, the Director of Government and Community Affairs for Hawaiian Electric here on Hawaii Island. I'll be the moderator tonight. While we wish we could all be together in person, the virtual meeting does provide an opportunity for our members across Hawaii Island to come together. As many of us have experienced, virtual meetings can be a challenge, so we ask for your patience with any technical difficulties this evening. We're recording the meeting so that folks who are unable to join us have the same opportunity to hear the presentation and your questions and comments. Tonight's meeting is also being shown on Hawaiian Electric's Facebook page, as well as on Naleo TV channel 54. We want to send a big mahalo to Naleo TV, Matt, Micah, the team, for their help with broadcasting this meeting. Thank you for bringing together our communities and working to get important information out. Next slide, please. At Hawaiian Electric, we are working to help build sustainable communities and create opportunities on Hawaii Island. Several years ago, to help meet the state's clean energy and decarbonization goals, we moved forward with large renewable energy procurements. We have learned quite a few lessons along the way, and we certainly continue learning. One of the best outcomes is that community outreach, and the community has been a big part in helping to improve the process, both our process and the regulatory process, and the policies that guide these renewable energy procurements. Joining me tonight is Kevin Walgen, our Director of Hawaii Island, who will provide our renewable energy progress. Also joining us is Becca Dehuff Matsushima, our Director of Renewable Acquisition. Becca will go over the request for proposals for the next stage of renewable energy procurement. Next slide, please. Your input in this process is very important. We're happy to answer questions and take comments after the presentation during the comment and question period. There are several ways we have for you to ask a question or submit comments, and you can see it on the slide here. You can email Hawaii Renewable RFP at hawaiianelectric.com. If you are joining us on Facebook Live, you can post a comment in the comment box located under the meeting. If you want to speak and are joining us on Microsoft Teams online or by phone, please wait until the question and comment period. A reminder that tonight's meeting is on the Hawaii Island Stage 3 Renewable Energy Request for Proposals. We welcome your input and questions on the draft request for proposals. I'll do my best to make sure that we answer the questions in the order they're received, and we'll try to answer as many of them as we can during this meeting. If we don't get to your question during the meeting, please email us again at Hawaii Renewable RFP at hawaiianelectric.com, and we'll make sure to get back to you. With that, I'll turn it over to Kevin Walgen to provide our renewable energy progress on Hawaii Island. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And before we talk about Stage 3 request for proposal, I'd like to start by showing you this map that displays existing and planned generation facilities that were selected in Stage 1 RFP, Stage 2 RFP, and has generation applications currently being reviewed by the Public Utilities Commission. On this slide, we have a diverse mix of renewable energy existing and planned that include wind, hydro, solar, biomass, biofuels, and geothermal. The firm generation or generation that can respond when demand requires it accounts for 7 facilities, 2 of which are independent power producers, Hamakua Energy Partners and Puna Geothermal Ventures, who have existing contracts with us. The other one is Puhonua, who has a contract with the Public Utilities Commission, or has a application with the Public Utilities Commission that was reopened in June, and a hearing has been scheduled for January of 2022. The remaining 4 facilities are fossil fuel generating facilities that we own in the Puna, Hilo, Waimea, and Keo'ole areas. The variable generation facilities, or generation that are not always available when the load demand requires it, accounts for 9 facilities around the island, 3 hydros, 2 wind farms, 3 solar plus battery facilities, and 1 energy storage system. Puna Geothermal Venture was reconnected to the grid in November of 2020 and provides about 26 megawatts to the grid on an average. In December of 2019, we submitted an amended contract to the Public Utilities Commission, where we are awaiting the Commission's guidance and decision on this revised purchase power agreement. Until then, the existing contract remains in place and expires in 2027. At Hawaiian Electric, we are committed to a sustainable Hawaii and making our home a better place for our children and future generations. We're adding more renewable energy to get off fossil fuels and reduce our carbon footprint while remaining reliable and available to meet our island electrical needs. The state of Hawaii has a goal of 100% renewable energy by 2045. In 2020, the renewable portfolio standard, or RPS, on Hawaii Island was 43.4%. With PGV back online and more customers are adopting rooftop solar, the number is increasing. And at the end of June of this year, the RPS was at 58.1%. In August of 2019, we issued a request for proposal for about 900 megawatts of renewable energy resources statewide. The orange boxes on this map show the projects that were selected for Hawaii Island. The first 2 stages, 3 solar plus storage projects and 1 standalone storage project totaling approximately 132 megawatts of generation and 492 megawatt hours of storage were selected. The project selected in stage 1 RFP was AES Waikoloa Solar and Halepuawehi Solar. The project selected in stage 2 RFP was Puako Solar, which Becca will have an update on, and the battery storage project at our Keo'ole power plant. We recently filed a draft request for proposals for the 3rd stage of our renewable energy procurement for Hawaii Island, which is the topic of our meeting this evening. And I'll hand it over to Becca Dehoff Matsushima, who will share the details on this topic.
Thank you, Kevin. And good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us this evening. As Kevin mentioned, I will be providing information related to our next procurement for Hawaii Island, which we refer to as our Stage 3 RFP. However, before I get started, I did want to give an update on the NG Puako Solar project that Kevin mentioned. This project was selected from our Stage 2 RFP, but we were recently informed by the developer that they have decided not to move forward with the project. The planning we did to determine the needs for the Stage 3 RFP included the assumption that this large project would be on the system. Therefore, based on this new information we have received that the project is not going to move forward, we will have to update some of the information we have submitted to the Commission and are providing to you tonight. We will make sure to update the community with this information when it's available. Turning now to our Stage 3 RFP, last Friday, October 15th, we filed our draft Stage 3 RFP for Hawaii Island. An RFP is a request for proposal. In other words, we are seeking developers to submit proposals for future renewable projects. This draft is not set in stone and will evolve based on the feedback and input that we receive, and that is why we are here to speak with you tonight. We want to ensure the community has a chance to learn about the RFP and to provide feedback prior to us finalizing the procurement. So let's go ahead and dive into what we are requesting. Next slide, please. The draft RFP was guided by our Hawaii Island Near-Term Grids Needs Assessment Report, which evaluated renewable generation needs and options through 2029, as well as our guiding principles for all procurements, which include transparency, predictability, and streamlining, community engagement, coordination and collaboration, and recognizing that there's no perfect answer and we must consider trade-offs. The grid needs assessment was filed in July with the State of Hawaii Public Utilities Commission, which I will refer to tonight as the Commission or PUC. The grid needs assessment evaluated adding new cost-effective resources and identification of grid needs, a reliability assessment of the system, validation of the operations of the future system through various simulations, and a transmission and system security assessment. The grid needs assessment identified a need for the generation to be on the east side of Hawaii Island. We will discuss this in more detail on the next slide. As we are working towards our transition to 100% renewable energy, this RFP is seeking only renewable generation sources. There's no limitation on the type of generation that can submit proposals as long as it's renewable. So for example, it could be solar, wind, geothermal, biomass, biofuel, or any other renewable resource. The RFP is also open to standalone storage, as well as what we refer to as aggregators. Aggregators are companies that take distributed energy resources, such as rooftop solar, and provide controls to allow these resources to be utilized as a group. We're actually seeking quite a large amount of energy under this RFP. We're seeking 206 gigawatt hours. Energy is the amount of electricity a generator produces over a specific period of time. 206 gigawatt hours is roughly enough energy to power 34,000 typical households on Hawaii Island on an annual basis. We're also seeking up to 95 megawatts of capacity, which is the maximum output a generator can physically produce. Many generators do not provide all the energy they are capable of providing at a given time, and when this energy is not in use, the capacity can be utilized to provide other important and needed grid services to ensure reliability. 95 megawatts of capacity would cover the unexpected loss of 2 of our existing firm generating units that Kevin discussed earlier. The RFP may result in 1 or more projects being selected to meet these needs. As noted, the grid needs assessment looked at needs through the end of this decade, so we're looking for proposals to submit projects that can be completed by the end of 2030. As I mentioned earlier, with the loss of the Puako Solar Project, we will need to reevaluate the results of the grid needs assessment, including limiting proposals to the east side of the island and the amount of energy and capacity we are seeking. So if we do end up changing these items, we'll make sure to update the community and our other stakeholders. So moving now to the requirement for the generation to be sited on the east, in East Hawaii. So we can move to the next slide. Yeah. This area can be seen in the green box on the map here on the screen. Our transmission lines run between East and West Hawaii. In our stage 1 and stage 2 procurements, Kevin covered, we selected the 3 large projects, which were all located in West Hawaii. We anticipate as we transition towards renewable energy, our existing fossil fuel units on the east side of Hawaii will be run less and less. That's why the grid needs assessment identified that we'll need the new renewable generation on the east side of Hawaii. Ensuring that we have this locational diversity of the resources helps to prevent reliability issues that may arise and ensure our power system is balanced across the island. This strengthens resilience and helps ensure that when you flip your light switch on, the lights will turn on. However, as I mentioned, we are going to reevaluate the locational aspect of the RFP now that we no longer have the stage 2 project, and we may be also seeking generation elsewhere on the island through this RFP. I want to now quickly cover the RFP process. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. The entire RFP process is overseen by the PUC. The PUC also hires an independent observer to oversee the process and make sure that the development of the RFP and the evaluation of proposals is fair. As we work together to meet the state of Hawaii's clean energy and decarbonization goals, it's important to choose resources that can best meet the needs of both the utility and the community. Hawaiian Electric follows a comprehensive information gathering process that ensures questions and concerns are adequately addressed before a decision is made. The process can be lengthy, but it's the right thing to do. This chart shows where we are in the process. Right now, we're in the regulatory approval stage as shown by the orange arrow. This step in itself has many subparts. As noted, the first step, we submitted a draft request for proposals to the PUC on October 15th. Now we're seeking input from stakeholders, including you. Based on this input, we'll revise the draft, doing our best to take into consideration the feedback received and to balance competing needs and interests and submit a final RFP to the Commission for its review and approval. The PUC may approve the next draft of the RFP or may ask for further revisions and another draft to be completed before issuing the RFP. After we issue the final RFP, we have a thorough evaluation process to ensure that the proposals meet the requirements that we set forth in the RFP. This includes reviewing both price and non-price aspects of each proposal. The types of non-price criteria we would look at include things such as a developer's community engagement plan, environmental impacts of the project, plans for treatment of cultural resources, development schedule, developer's experience, the commercial readiness of the technology that's being proposed, and permitting plans for the project. Ultimately, based on the evaluation process, we will select a final project or projects that meet the needs being sought in the RFP. After the final projects are selected, we'll begin contract negotiations with the winning bidders. The contracts, called power purchase agreements, or shorthand, we refer to them as PPAs, are then submitted to the PUC for approval. There are several opportunities for you to provide feedback during the process. As noted on the screen now, during the contract negotiation, as well now during the development of the RFP, as well as during the contract negotiation and approval stages. And those are noted in this chart by the orange stars. We really encourage you to be a part of this process, and the deadline to file comments with the company in this first step of the process is November 19th. Okay, next slide. As I mentioned, we evaluate several non-price criteria for each project, and we would honestly be here all night if I covered each of them. So tonight I wanted to focus on the community engagement criteria. As one of the RFP proposal aspects, developers are required to submit a community outreach plan with their proposal that includes project description, community scoping, project benefits, government approvals, their development process, and communications plan. If selected, this outreach plan will become public. We evaluate each developer's outreach plan, and only those that meet or exceed our RFP criteria are allowed to pass through to the next phase of the evaluation process. Further, the better the plan, the more points the project will receive towards its overall non-price score in the evaluation. After a project is selected to the final award group, developers must implement the community outreach plan. So this would include taking actions such as updating, providing a comprehensive update to the community outreach plan after selection, developing a public project website, which shall include public information and community outreach plan itself. And we would link to that from our own website so that it's easy for the community to find. Developing a project presentation that will be shared with the community. Communicating important information about the project with stakeholders in advance of community meetings. Performing media outreach and advertising to make sure that the community is aware of the meetings. Soliciting public comments, both in support and in opposition of the project, and making sure that those are all compiled and filed with the Public Utilities Commission verbatim as received. And then the selected projects must also provide community members timely information during all phases of the project. So we're not just looking to make sure that the developer reaches out one time. We really want the selected developers to have a continuous involvement with the community, which includes, but is not limited to, during the time we're negotiating the power purchase agreement, during the PUC approval and permitting processes, and then throughout construction. And then once the project is up and running throughout its remaining life, we would expect the projects to continue their community engagement and involvement. So next slide. I wanted to end with providing some insight into the next steps. And the entire RFP process, as I mentioned, is overseen by the PUC. So this is the company's proposed timeline that we filed, and the PUC may change this once they have the docket open and the procedural schedule set. We're currently in the second step of the proposed timeline, which is tonight's community meeting. And typically the PUC will also hold a technical conference, which we would expect to occur sometime in November. As noted, we are requesting comments on the draft documents by November 19th, and then from there, we'll work to revise the RFP and anticipate filing a revised draft RFP for PUC approval sometime probably in late December. We then expect to issue the RFP in February of 2022 after it's approved by the Commission, and select projects and begin contract negotiations at the end of 2022. As I mentioned earlier tonight, we would not expect to see any of these projects up and running until sometime between 2027 and 2030. So I know I've talked tonight about some pretty dense topics, and we want to make sure now to give you ample time for comments and questions. So I'll turn it back over to Jen, who will facilitate the Q&A session. Thank you again for being here and your interest in our procurements.
Thanks, Becca, and thanks, Kevin. Lots of great information, but we're now actually in our favorite part of the evening where we do less talking and more listening. We would appreciate your feedback and happy to answer your questions. I did want to note, I think some folks had trouble logging onto Microsoft Teams, so I hope that they were able to get in. I do know we've got folks on Facebook Live as well. If you'd like to ask a question or submit a comment, you can email us at Hawaii Renewable RFP at hawaiianelectric.com. If you're on Facebook Live, you can post a comment in the comment box there. If you're joining on Microsoft Teams, we invite you to say a few words, and to speak, you can use click on the raise hand feature. It's at the top of your screen, or press *5 if you're on the phone to raise your hand. I'll do my best to make sure that we get to your questions, and I wanted to say a huge thank you to the internal team helping me to monitor the questions and comments that are coming in through various channels. Again, we'll try to answer as many questions as we can during this meeting. If we don't get to your question, please email us and we'll make sure we get back to you. We did allocate an hour for questions and comments, and we ask everyone to please be respectful and mindful of the time so that everyone's voices can be heard. At this time, I'd also like to introduce Colton Ching, our Senior Vice President of Planning and Technology, who's also available to answer questions along with Kevin and Becca. You see, I got to pull up the questions. Well, for those that, we're still waiting for some questions, but for those that were not able to join us earlier, again, if you'd like to raise your hand on Facebook Live, or not on Facebook Live, on Microsoft Teams, you can do so now, and we can take your questions. Hi, Councilmember Richards, I see you.
Aloha, Jen. Can I say a few words?
Yes, please.
First of all, I really appreciate the fact that this process actually exists, meaning the outreach to the community, and trying to explain the process as we go forward. As we take steps towards a more renewable, more self-reliant process with our energy, I really appreciate what HELCO, or now I guess Hawaiian Electric, is doing. It's about that outreach to the community. I chair agriculture, water, energy, and environmental management for the county, and this is the process that I really appreciate. You know, I don't want to speak a long time because this is the time for the community to voice and raise their concerns or compliments, depending as it may be. You know, I'm reminded of one thing that HELCO did, and it concerns North Kohala, which is part of my district. The outreach there for us to come up with a solution going forward and making steps towards a microgrid, you know, that came from the community and the outreach. So I really appreciate the process. So thanks. I appreciate for being here, and I'm here to listen to.
Thanks, Councilmember Richards. That relationship between the County of Hawaii, council members, and everyone working together really does make a big difference. So really appreciate your support, especially as you chair Energy, Ag, and Water on Hawaii Island. We did get a question on Facebook. Is the person had tuned in a little late? Is the scope of this PPA project for the Big Island only? So maybe Becca, if you could answer that question.
Sure. Yes. This RFP is only for the for Hawaii Island, and that's so our stage 3 process is not going to be run on any other islands, right?
Thanks,
as of right now.
Councilmember Richards. That relationship between the County of Hawaii council members and everyone working together really does make a big difference. So really appreciate your support. That was such a fabulous statement I made that they wanted to play it again for everyone to hear. So thank you. See, these are the technical, the technical issues. But that was a thank you again to the County of Hawaii. Sorry about that, Becca. Do you want to repeat what you said?
Sure. I was just saying this RFP is limited only to Hawaii Island, and I know in stage 1 and stage 2 we did run RFPs on Hawaii, Oahu, and Maui, but this stage 3 is different and will be limited just to Hawaii.
Thanks, Becca. We've got another question here. How many awards will be granted? Is there any opportunities for small business?
Sure, I can take that. So we don't know exactly how many awards will be granted, as we're looking to fill the targets that I mentioned for energy and capacity, and there's some other grid needs that the grid needs assessment identified that we assume those resources will provide, and will ensure that when we look at the final selection. So it'll depend on the types of projects that are bid and the size of those, how many will be needed to be selected to meet those energy targets. And then in terms of opportunities for small businesses, I'm not sure what type of small business exactly, if there's a specific type, but anyone is open to bid into any developer can bid in. So that is definitely an opportunity. And I know many of the developers that do bid in also look to partner with local consultants and local businesses to complete various parts of the project. So that's also an option for local participation as well.
Thanks, Becca. We did get a question from our Research and Development Director, Doug Adams, and I see actually, Doug, you're on the line if you wanted to make a comment, but I do see your question here.
Thank you, Jen. Appreciate it. I wasn't able to get on, and then I was able to just as Councilmember Richards was talking. So it must have been he's good karma, best I can tell. The question really was, Becca, when you identified the project that was going to be pulled back, I missed that. I was wondering if you could repeat which project it was that was going to be pulled back, and then is there any additional information regarding why that's happening? Thank you.
Sure. The project that I identified was the stage 2 selected project, the Gulf Coast Solar Project. It was a 60 megawatt project in West Hawaii. It was the only project that we had moved forward with as part of the stage 2 proposals. The contract between the company and the developer allowed the developer a right to decide not to move forward with their project after the interconnection requirement study. They determined, based on the results of that study and also just concerns with the current market, that they, as well as new tariffs and executive orders that have been issued that affect the solar industry, that at this time they weren't prepared to move forward.
Thank you. When you say the new tariffs, are you talking about the tariffs with China?
That's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doug. We do have a hand raised. I see Nathaniel Kinney is here on Microsoft Teams.
Hi. Am I coming through?
Oh, yes, perfect. We can hear you.
Yes, Nathaniel Kinney from the Hawaii Regional Council of Carpenters. How are you guys? This is such an informative presentation, and I just wanted, we brought up an issue at the community solar meeting last night for Hawaii Island, and wanted to bring it up for this RFP discussion. Is there any way to get into the RFPs, like mandates or requirements of hiring a certain percentage of local workers based in Hawaii Island? That's one. Number two, is there any way to get any sort of contractor certification provisions to make sure that the contractors that the developers contract with to actually build these projects, that they're paying a living wage, that they're providing health and welfare benefits for the workers that cover their dependents and their spouses, provide meaningful retirement plans so that these workers can retire in dignity, are part of state approved apprenticeship programs. Like, what we see as at the regional council of carpenters is that, you know, this pivot to green energy and sustainable energy not only provides a lot of jobs, but could provide meaningful career paths for a lot of the people in Hawaii Island. And because there's so many of these projects coming up, we just would like to see some sort of wage requirements, local hire provisions, and meaningful elements to so that people that wish to be part of this process and wish to kind of put these projects together, that those people have a meaningful career opportunities and living wages. And we'd love to like sit down with the company, and we will be submitting something in writing, but I just wanted to make sure that I participated in the process and got to see the presentation. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Nathaniel. We really appreciate you calling in and providing that input. And we'll take your comments into consideration. Really appreciate you joining. I think we've got another question here from Facebook. I think, Becca, this one will be for you. Is Hawaiian Electric's plan to have both Huhonua and the RFP3 projects operating at the same time, or will it be one or the other?
It could be both, or it could be, one or the other. Everything that the utility does is subject to PUC approval. The Huhonua project is still currently going through the PUC approval process. So if that is approved, that project will come online, as well as if any projects that we select through this RFP are approved, those projects would, have the opportunity also to come online.
Thanks, Becca. And then just a reminder for folks that joined us on Microsoft Teams, and I see folks are still joining. If you did have a question or you want to make a comment, at the very top of your screen, you can use the raise hand feature, and then you can unmute yourself and ask your question or make your comment. And then again, if you're calling in by phone, press *5, and we'll see your virtual hand raised. And again, apologies for folks that had trouble getting on through Microsoft Teams. We're all still learning, even after a year and a half, with all of these various platforms. So apologies. Thanks for joining us. Any questions from our folks on this call? Oh, Dave Kimmett, see your hand raised.
Okay, thanks so much for hosting this tonight. We're in Colorado. I'm with UV. We're a utility scale solar energy development firm based in Boulder, Colorado. And I'm curious if the slide that was shown earlier that had a map representing where the focus area on the east part of Hawaii Island could be shown again.
Can we go back to the screen? I see what you're asking, a focus map. Becca, do we have something?
Yeah, that's the one. Great.
And then maybe, Becca, you can mention, because I'm not sure if David was on earlier. that this RFP, the focus area may be changed?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, and for those who may have joined us late, this was what our original grid needs assessment had identified as where we would be looking for new generation on the island. But because of information that we learned this week of one of our stage 2 projects withdrawing from the process and not moving forward, we are going to reevaluate that. So we may be opening up this green box to other areas of the island for generation locations.
Sure, that's great. And totally understandable. Thank you. I appreciate you going back to that slide.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks, David. We really appreciate all of you joining this evening. Any questions? Okay, well, if there are no other questions this evening, oh wait, somebody's coming in. Oh, we do have a question. Doug Adams, I see your hand raised.
Thanks, Jennifer. Listen, I just wanted to say that the county has been really grateful to the Hawaii Island contingent leadership here from Hawaiian Electric. Since we have been in office, the conversations about what your plans are and the work that you're doing, as well as your willingness to listen to the concerns and the future vision that we have for support around the island, making sure that we're looking at cost of living issues for our residents, and also trying to take care of the businesses, particularly our small businesses that are on this island. You all have been in lockstep with us as we try and move forward. And I know on behalf of the mayor that I can say just really appreciate the efforts that you all are making. And I just didn't want to let this opportunity slip by without letting the public know that you all are working very well with the county. And we really appreciate all the efforts that you're making to reach out into the community as well.
Thanks, Doug. Really appreciate those comments, but that comment is a big ditto. And I think it really takes both sides working together, and you guys have been really wonderful to work with. I think you ask tough questions, and that's a good thing. I think it makes us reevaluate and change it when we need to. So I have to say that really appreciate you and the mayor and the departments and the council. Speaking of which, I see Tim Richards has his hand raised.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. I was going to echo a little bit of what Doug had just mentioned about HELCO always being at the table to have the conversations. And we don't always agree, but at least we sit down and have the conversation so we can go forward. But I was going to ask a question. I think I know the answer. We're supposed to be 100% renewable by 2045, and Hawaii County is approximately 50%. I'm not sure who I asked that question to, Kevin, or who do I ask that?
Kevin can take that.
Can you repeat the question again, Jen? Sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
Councilman.
That's all right. I was one of the guys having trouble getting on the call as well. I know we're supposed to be 100% renewable by 2045. And we are, I think, are we about 50%? Aren't we about halfway there? You're on mute again, Kevin.
Yes, so let go back to that slide. If you guys can go back to that slide 3 or 4. Our slide before. Yeah, right there. So we're at the end of the year, we're at 43.4% renewable. And with the way PGV, we were recording around 58% by June of this year. So it's increasing based off of the fact that PGV is online and running. But again, what I had mentioned was DGV is actually at about an average of about 26 megawatts. So, you know, they're still not at full capacity yet, which we see them coming. And with the solar coming in and all the different pieces coming in, we see that number increasing consistently throughout the year and through the following years when the RFPs, stage one RFPs and possibly the stage 2 RFP coming in or stage 3 RFP coming in.
Okay, so with that, I'll just make a comment based upon the information you just delivered with withdrawal of the solar on the west side. Concern for the whole county grid as a whole, generation, and then obviously transmission of that energy. So as you look in your RFP, I'm sure you're going to include that. But I just want to express my concern that be sure we have the generation in the appropriate places so we can get the energy where we need to, and we have the transmission capability to get that done. Thanks.
That's a good point. Thank you, Councilman. And Becca actually had covered that. And looking at with the withdrawal, we got to go back and look at those numbers to see where it's going to benefit our system, our customers. So very good point, very good catch on the reevaluation piece.
Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, Councilmember Richards. Appreciate that. We actually have some questions that have come in. Someone said, does the decision-making take into account the net near-term GHG emissions of the proposed operation? The climate crisis requires that we optimize carbon drawdown and emissions reduction, so this is critical. And then let me know if you need me to repeat that.
I think I got it. I can cover that one, Jen. So the RFP itself does not have an evaluation criteria related to GHG emissions. There are environmental criteria where we're looking at the overall environmental plan for the project, as well as I mentioned, we require the project has to be renewable as defined under Hawaii's RPS law. However, once we do select our projects and move to the regulatory approval phase, then in that phase, we are required to complete a GHG analysis for each project prior to it being approved by the Public Utilities Commission. So we would complete that GHG analysis with the selected project and submit that as part of our application for approval to the commission, where it would be evaluated.
Thanks, Becca. Another question here, is there enough energy demand to take advantage of both the full dispatch of both Huhonua and full dispatch of RFP 3? And could RFP stage 3 projects potentially remove the need for Huhonua? This is similar, I think, to that question we had earlier.
You want me to take that one,
Yeah.
Becca?
Yes, please.
Yeah. So good evening, everyone. Colton Ching from Hawaiian Electric. Yeah, so as we evaluate proposals that we get submitted in this RFP, we are going to look at a whole number of scenarios, including how we would dispatch the projects that we're contemplating under this RFP, along with other resources on the system, including Huhonua, for which we have a contract in place, but is still going before the commission. When we make selections, though, we're not going to make selections only if we're able to take the full dispatch of a resource. We're going to take into account the use of the resource being dispatched across the range of its operation. And that's where a lot of the grid services, a lot of the value comes from. And so we're going to take into account how it would be operated, basically every hour over the course of a contract lifetime, to determine whether the addition of that resource adds value to the customers in the Big Island or not. And that's what we'll be doing in our selection.
Thanks, Colton. We've got another question here. Could you briefly recap the capacity and the renewable object of this PPA project? A few sentences of the nature of the project would help. So Becca.
Sure. Just reading the question myself. So the project, we're looking for both energy and capacity. So the capacity or the energy needs are and I'm blanking on the total number. I think we said 206 gigawatt hours.
200, correct.
And we're looking for roughly 95 megawatts of capacity, though this, as we mentioned, will likely change based on the withdrawal of the stage 2 RFP project. So we will be reevaluating those needs. The nature of the project, I'm not sure exactly what the question is referring to there. If that's the type of project, it can be any renewable project, any energy type. And it can also be standalone storage, can meet the needs, as well as aggregators. So we're really looking for a variety of different options that could meet the needs that we're looking to fulfill on the grid. If I didn't answer that question exactly what you were looking for, let me know and I can try again if there's something more specific.
Thanks, Becca. Actually, that's a good reminder for those that maybe joined after I mentioned, if you're on Microsoft Teams and you wanted to make a comment or had a follow-up question, at the very top of the screen, there's a little hand there, and if you press it, it'll raise your hand, and I'll see that you want to speak. But I do have a question here from Facebook. Why do biofuels get special treatment versus other types of renewable fuels regarding how many years are required to be contracted at time of bid? Becca,
Sure,
that's you.
Yeah, I can take that one. Based on the utilities experience, and we're definitely open to feedback on this topic if others have different experiences or different thoughts. We've found that biofuel suppliers are not willing to contract over a 25 or 30-year term of a contract, whereas something like biomass would be more of an agricultural type contract. You can usually get land lease for that period of time to develop an agricultural crop that would be needed. So it was really based on our understanding of the markets for the different types of fuel, and what we've seen in previous procurements. But again, we're open to feedback on the structure of that, and if others have thoughts, please submit comments to the utility for consideration.
And if there are follow-up questions you have, after this meeting is done and you think about it later, you can always email us at that Hawaii Renewable RFP at hawaiianelectric.com, and we'll make sure we get back to you right away. Okay, I don't see any questions right now oh, sorry, there is one. Is there enough energy demand to take advantage of both a full dispatch of Honua and RFP stage 3? So is there enough energy demand?
Yes, so, Cote, you let me start and then you close them.
Sure.
Okay, so when we look at what we have on island and we look at where we're moving 2045, we're trying to get to 100% renewable energy. So your question is there enough demand? Right now, we're running fossil fuels to make up that demand. And the goal of 100% renewable by 2045 is still a goal that both we as a utility, the state, and even some of our county agencies has committed to decarbonize, to lower this carbon output based off of fossil fuels. So when you ask that question, it's tricky because the load can change over time, but as of right now, we're using fossil fuels to make that up. And we want to get to 100% renewable. So we taking in all these RFPs, these different contracts, and trying to get ourselves, and Councilman Richards had mentioned it, right? Where we're at and how we changed to get to the 100% is our driver to look at every single ability or possibility to get to that 100%. So I hope I answered the question. I'll let Cote close it.
Yeah, no need to close, but I'll do my best Jen impersonation, because what you're talking about Kevin, really gets to the next question that we got in from Facebook, which is about will projects from the stage 3 RFP allow for electric light fossil plants be retired? And if so, which ones? So this really gets to the point that Kevin was making, that in getting to 100% RPS, by definition, we need to substitute all of the day-to-day functions that our fossil fuel plants provide today and replace that function from renewable resources. And that's a big driver for what we're doing in this RFP. The grid services that Becca talked about earlier, in part, is to provide those services in lieu of fossil plants that are providing it today. So on the second half of that question, the types of fossil plants that we want to retire are older, less flexible units, which are mostly our steam-fired generators that are not the youngest plants in our fleet, and by their technical design are not able to adjust their power as rapidly as some of our newer technologies. And so the Puna steam plant and our steam plants at Hill are the kinds of units that we're looking to retire first, ahead of our other units on our system.
Thanks, Colton. Geez, you're such a good moderator. I was going to let you take over. We do have another question on here. Has HEI projected second generation system component replacement availability and cost, as the component lifetimes are much shorter than the systems they are replacing? Colton, would that be you?
Yeah, I'll take a swing, and
Okay.
and Becca and Kevin can jump in. So I think the question is saying, hey, these projects that you're going to be contracting, they may be using technologies where components of that project or that system have lives perhaps shorter than sort of the older technologies like a steam turbine or steam pipe or condenser. And that's probably true for many of the newer technologies. But for our power purchase agreements, it's I'm not a lawyer, so I'm going to probably use the layman's term on this, but we're really contracting for performance and services from our independent power producers. And so, if we enter into a 20 or 30-year contract with a developer, they have the responsibility to do the ongoing, not just day-to-day maintenance, but the ongoing capital maintenance and replacement that may be needed in order for them as a project owner, independent power producer, to continue to provide all of the grid services that they're contracted for. And the contract has terms to make sure that they do that they're incentivized to do that.
Thanks, Colton. Any questions, any further questions from our folks that are on Microsoft Teams? We've gotten some comments on Facebook, saying this meeting has been very informative. We really appreciate the folks that have tuned in and the comments and your questions. Very helpful for us as we are working on this RFP. Our Councilmember Tim Richards, I see your hand up.
Yeah, just a quick comment. We're talking a lot about replacing equipment, and I'm sure I'm going to assume part of the RFP is also going to have plan for end of life. Some of our, like for instance, photovoltaic cells, there are some things, and I chair environmental management as well. So concern for end of life for this equipment, and I just want to be sure that the RFP has something in there that addresses that concern once we get to the end of the useful life of that.
So the RFP does require submission of a decommissioning plan. It's usually rough at that stage, as the decommissioning of the facility might look a lot different when we actually get to the end of its life than what is anticipated now. There may be different options for decommissioning. We may decide to renegotiate. So there are there may be some of the facilities that we want to continue to use even after the term of the contract. But there is a requirement for a decommissioning plan to be provided. And then in the contract document, not the whole facility, but as usually the landowner has, that the developer is working with usually has decommissioning requirements on its own, and we don't want to overstep the landowner. But for the company-owned interconnection facilities that are built as part of these projects, we do require that if at the end of term we don't need those anymore, that the developer is responsible for ensuring that those are removed and the land is returned to its prior state.
Thanks, Becca. Don't see any further. Oh, one question is coming up. Give us 1 second while we get that question. We really appreciate everyone joining us this evening. One of the comments I mentioned earlier, as we were talking about prep for this meeting, we were saying, we wish we could do this in person, but this has been really the first time we've ever been able to have a meeting where our communities across Hawaii Island, at least on this energy topic, are able to call in and talk story. Usually we do one in West Hawaii, one in East Hawaii, to make sure that people can make it to the meeting. So this virtual world does provide some opportunities that we didn't have before. Here's the question: what is the minimum megawatt sizing you're looking for from a bidder? Is it a single bidder, or would multiple bidders be accepted? Becca. Yes, so multiple bidders will potentially be accepted depending on the projects and their sizing. I believe the minimum size is 2.5 megawatts, which is sort of what triggers the competitive bidding process. That's the limit set by the commission. So that's the minimum size that could be bid. And then there's no maximum size, but we do have a single point of failure requirement of 30 megawatts, which would require multiple points of interconnection for a facility if it exceeded that 30 megawatt size. Thanks, Becca. All right, I'm gonna make a last call for questions. I don't see any. Just want to make sure I don't miss anybody. A last call for questions, but Doug Adams, our R&D director.
Thanks, Jan. I apologize as you're ending up, but I did want to ask, and I'm not sure that it was covered, and if it was, I again apologize for the question. Does this RFP include the grid infrastructure as a part of the process? Is there going to be, when you're looking for these production elements as a part of the request for proposal, are there also going to be, are you also asking for them to include any of the grid maintenance or construction elements as well?
I can take that one. Projects are required to include in their bids any of the interconnection equipment needed for the grid. So if they need a tie line or a substation or switching station, those types of requirements, they're required to build those for the project, and to pay for that cost should be included in their bid pricing. There may be instances, where a grid project is needed, not specifically for any one project, but just to upgrade the grid for renewables in general. Those would not be included. So it's sort of the difference between a system upgrade and a cost that's specific to the project. So if something is needed specific to the project, then that would be the responsibility of the developer.
If I could follow up, is there in your evaluation of the applications in this regard, will there be anything that looks at the relative currency and technology for some of this infrastructure development or construction?
I'm not sure I fully understand the question. Are you, we do require developers to bid, to provide information on how they would interconnect to the grid, and that is looked at during the evaluation process. And we, as part of the RFP document, set forth what we require in terms of interconnection. It's in Appendix H to the RFP. We have single lines and other technical information regarding what we would require. But I'm not sure I fully understood your question.
Sure. I apologize. If someone is doing something or suggesting that they're going to do something that may be a little bit more expensive, but has a life cycle and perhaps is more current technology or more cutting edge technology, how is that going to be counted, I guess, in the in the evaluation?
Sure. I'll take this one, and Colton, jump in if you think I'm mischaracterizing it. So there's kind of two ways. So one, in the non-price side, in terms of the technology, we do look at, how there is criteria that the technology has to be tested, and that we're not gonna, we're not really looking for maybe technology that hasn't been proven on a utility scale basis yet. So there is sort of a viability of that technology that we're looking, just to ensure that we don't want to have our customers pay for a project that may not end up being commercially ready. But then on the evaluation side, in terms of cost, so as I mentioned, developers are responsible for including all the costs to interconnect their project, and for that in their pricing. And then that would go through a modeling. Part of the detailed evaluation would include modeling and simulations of that system. So if a project, all of its characteristics, the grid needs that it would provide to the system, the number of hours that it's available during the day, the size of it, as well as the costs, are all factored into that model and evaluated. So that's where I think this would most likely be evaluated and come out, would be as part of those simulations that would be run during the modeling phase.
And Doug, just to make it really clear, that evaluation of the value that a candidate project provides is over the lifetime of the project, right? So we're not just looking at first cost, we're looking at all costs and all values that a project could deliver.
Thank you.
Thanks, Colton, Becca, and Doug, for those questions. I don't see any other questions that have come in. So with that, I think we're just about to wrap up this meeting. I don't know if any of our panelists had any closing remarks they wanted to make. They now realize this is the big and best island.
I just wanted to, oh, go ahead, Colton.
No, I was just going to say I'm done being Jen for tonight.
Oh, you're doing such a good job.
And Jen, the only thing that I would add is I would say, thanks everybody for participating. We've been repeating this over and over and over again, but these RFPs, these community outreaches, it's not possible unless we get feedback and questions from everybody else around us, our stakeholders like the county, our council members, all the different technical people that actually understand the different components that go into it. So even if you guys didn't ask your question, but the question comes up after, we appreciate everything that comes in so that we can, from the utility side, weigh out all the pieces. Doesn't necessarily mean we'll go that route, but we at least can weigh it out, and it's always good to see the perspectives.
Yeah, I would just echo what Kevin said, that please continue to submit feedback. I really want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I know it's a big ask to come during dinner time and taking you away from your family. So appreciate the participation and helping us make the process more informed and hopefully result in a better end product. So I really do appreciate everyone taking the time to join us today.
Thanks, Becca. You took the words right off my top of my mind right now. But thank you for joining us. Your input is so important in this process, and I know we've been repeating it, but it really is. And you can also provide your comments to the company on the draft request for proposal up until November 19th. Again, at that Hawaii Renewable RFP at hawaiianelectric.com. If you have follow-up questions, please email us. And then for those, again, I apologize if you weren't able to join at first on Microsoft Teams. We did record this meeting, and as soon as we get that uploaded, it will be on the website so that you can view the information we had gone over in the beginning of the meeting. But we really look forward to working with all of you. We said it earlier tonight. I think living on an island, we do have to work together, all of us, in order to really move forward to more sustainable communities. And I think that's what we do here on Hawaii Island. I think it is what makes us special. And so thank you again. Really appreciate you spending this evening with us. Mahalo.
Thank you. Good night.